The Pacific horizon glowed crimson on that fateful morning in November 1943. Blood seemed to seep across the sky above Tarawa Atoll. Jungle mist rose from dense vegetation where concrete fortifications and steel weaponry had turned coral beauty into a death fortress. Deep beneath the surface, Admiral Keiji Shibasaki peered through his German periscope from inside his reinforced command center. 50 feet of earth and concrete separated him from the world above. This 50-year-old naval veteran had dedicated 2 full years to transforming Tarawa into what he believed was an unconquerable stronghold. Oil fumes mixed with concrete dust in the humid underground air. Nervous perspiration from 4,800 Japanese soldiers filled the space. These defenders expected to watch American forces commit military suicide. The admiral smoothed his crisp white uniform and faced his gathered staff. His voice resonated with the assurance of someone who had analyzed every American beach assault since Marines first landed in Nicaragua. He proclaimed with absolute certainty that Americans could never capture Tarawa. Not with 1,000,000 soldiers, not in a century of trying. His declaration bounced off the concrete surfaces surrounding them. Yet something appeared on the distant water that contradicted every intelligence briefing. Through the periscope lens, Shibasaki observed specks materializing at the water's edge. These weren't the disorganized, scattered transport vessels his intelligence had predicted would arrive. Perfect formation governed their movement. Their spacing demonstrated mathematical precision. Their timing showed flawless synchronization. Dawn's illumination revealed shapes that stopped his breathing. 535 vessels stretched across his field of vision. Staff officers clustered around radio equipment. Color drained from their faces as reports flooded in from observation stations throughout the atoll. "The enemy fleet extends beyond what we can see," came one report. 15 aircraft carriers have been confirmed, came another. No tactical manual contained formations like these. Shibasaki had prepared his defenses for typical American recklessness. He had planned for their usual pattern of hasty, poorly organized beach attacks. His battle plans from October 1942 were crystal clear. Let the enemy gather for their landing attempt. Then destroy their packed transports with focused firepower. These ships refused to cluster like helpless targets. Mathematical precision governed their positioning. They created overlapping zones of fire that transformed the lagoon into a coordinated killing field. Japanese positions became the targets. Low rumbling began as barely audible vibration. The coral bedrock transmitted tremors through Shibasaki's feet. The whisper grew into a roar that loosened dust from ceiling fixtures and shook radio apparatus. Muzzle flashes bloomed across the American fleet like lethal blossoms through his periscope view. What froze his blood was the bombardment's systematic nature. Random destruction wasn't occurring. Sequential firing from each ship created rolling waves of devastation that swept across Japanese positions with clockwork accuracy. The next 76 hours would haunt military leaders for generations. An entire nation would abandon fundamental beliefs about warfare. One question would destroy his worldview and reshape the Pacific conflict forever. How could such coordination even exist? Understanding what Shibasaki witnessed through that periscope is essential to grasping why his hands started shaking. 20 years of amphibious warfare study had shaped his thinking. Young Lieutenant Shibasaki had studied the disastrous British attack at Gallipoli. 9 months of chaos resulted because British forces couldn't coordinate naval and army operations. As a senior commander, he had witnessed Japanese victories throughout the Pacific. Individual courage and superior fighting spirit had overwhelmed poorly coordinated Allied defenders there. Centuries of samurai tradition formed the foundation of Japanese military doctrine that had built his career. Decisive battle concepts emphasized concentrated force and warrior spirit, crushing enemies through superior will and tactical surprise. Japanese coordination at Pearl Harbor had shocked Americans. In the Philippines, Singapore, and across the Dutch East Indies, Japanese forces succeeded through hard, fast, coordinated strikes that exceeded enemy expectations. Months of preparation at Tarawa had followed this proven approach. His 4,800 defenders occupied interconnected bunkers designed for crossfire zones that would massacre Americans stumbling ashore in typical Western confusion. 3-foot-thick concrete walls surrounded him. Steel doors could withstand direct battleship gun hits. Artillery pieces were pre-registered on every possible landing beach. Morning light illuminating the American fleet revealed something that defied the expected pattern. An urgent communication reached him from his communications officer, voice strained with confusion. "Reports from Guadalcanal contradict our tactical assessments," the man announced. Shibasaki turned away from his periscope. "What kind of reports?" "Intelligence suggests Americans achieved unprecedented coordination during their August offensive. Our planners reported being stunned by coordination capabilities exceeding all previous assessments." Those words hung in the humid bunker atmosphere like a death sentence. Shibasaki had dismissed such reports as exaggeration from defeated commanders making excuses. Through his periscope, American ships maintained perfect spacing while maneuvering in waters that should have created chaos. Supply vessels moved between warships without confusion. Aircraft carriers launched fighter planes in coordinated waves, suggesting radio communication between pilots, ships, and ground controllers. Amphibious operations weren't supposed to function this way. American military history was familiar to Shibasaki. Civil War generals had struggled with telegraph communications. World War I forces required months of planning for simple trench assaults. Even successful American operations against Japanese positions earlier in this war had shown typical Western confusion. Individual units fighting separate battles with minimal integration. What he observed defied everything he understood about military logistics. Through radio intercepts, his intelligence officers had tracked American preparations. The scale was staggering. Operations coordinated across 3,500 miles of ocean. Supply lines stretched back to Pearl Harbor and the continental United States. Shibasaki had calculated this was logistically impossible with existing communication technology and command structures. Yet here they were. American naval gunfire is adjusting based on spotter aircraft reports, his artillery commander announced. They're correcting their aim in real time. Real-time coordination between ships and aircraft. 2 decades of military service had never shown Shibasaki anything like this level of integration. Japanese forces coordinated through careful pre-planning and rigid command structures. Americans appeared to be adapting their coordination as battle conditions changed. The implications struck him like a physical assault. If Americans could coordinate supply operations across thousands of miles of ocean, traditional Japanese defensive strategy became obsolete. If they could integrate naval gunfire with air support and ground operations in real time, Japanese bunkers became death traps rather than defensive advantages. Landing craft approached the reef in perfect waves through his periscope view, not the scattered, independent assault he had prepared for. These boats maintained precise intervals while naval gunfire lifted and shifted to support their advance. Fighter aircraft strafed Japanese positions in coordinated patterns, suggesting every pilot knew exactly where every other unit was located. Mathematical precision became undeniable as his stomach knotted. Forward observers report American forces have radio communication between individual landing craft, supporting warships, and overhead aircraft, his communications officer announced, voice cracking. They're coordinating at the squad-level coordination with naval and air support. 20 years of military service had never prepared Shibasaki for anything like this. The most terrifying realization was just beginning to dawn on him. Bunker walls representing 2 years of construction. Interlocking fields of fire that took months to calculate. Artillery positions registered with mathematical precision. All of it designed to defeat the uncoordinated American assault he expected. Instead, he faced an enemy that coordinated better than his own forces. American bombardment grew louder. The systematic nature of that bombardment made his blood run cold. Each explosion followed the last in a pattern suggesting every shell, every bomb, every machine gun burst was part of a unified plan being executed with mechanical precision. Through concrete walls, he could hear his own men shouting in confusion and growing panic. They had trained to fight American individuals. They had prepared to defeat American courage and superior equipment. They had never prepared to fight American coordination. What happened next would shatter not just Shibasaki's defensive plans, but the entire Japanese understanding of what modern warfare could become when systematic integration replaced individual heroism. Bombardment stopped. 30 seconds of eerie silence settled over Tarawa Atoll. Landing craft formed perfect assault waves in the lagoon through his periscope view. Then, systematic destruction began. The next 76 hours wouldn't just break Japanese defensive lines. It would shatter fundamental assumptions of warfare itself. Naval gunfire resuming, his communications officer shouted over renewed bombardment. This wasn't the random pounding Shibasaki expected. American warships fired in sequence. Rolling barrage moved across Japanese positions like a deadly wave. When shells lifted from one defensive sector, landing craft immediately advanced toward that same area. Perfect timing. Perfect coordination. Shibasaki gripped his periscope handles until his knuckles turned white. American Marines hit the beach through the eyepiece, not as scattered individuals, but as coordinated units with predetermined objectives. Radio antennas on their landing craft bent and swayed as operators maintained constant communication with ships, aircraft, and other Marine units. Bunker 7 reports direct hits from naval gunfire directed by spotter aircraft, his artillery commander called out. Americans are adjusting their fire based on real-time observation, real-time fire adjustment during amphibious assault. Shibasaki had never seen anything like this level of integration between sea, air, and land forces. What made his chest tighten with genuine fear was the systematic nature of American coordination. This wasn't superior firepower overwhelming Japanese positions. It was systematic integration that rendered Japanese defensive tactics obsolete. Radio intercepts allowed his communications officers to track American coordination in real time. Fighter pilots reported Japanese positions to naval gunfire controllers. Spotters called in airstrikes on specific bunkers. Artillery fire lifted precisely as Marine units advanced. Fire resumed the moment those units moved to cover. We're intercepting American radio traffic that suggests coordination down to individual squad level, his intelligence officer announced, voice trembling. They know where every unit is located at all times. Individual squad coordination with air and naval support. Shibasaki's engineering training rebelled against the impossibility of what he witnessed. Evidence kept mounting. American casualties remained surprisingly light, despite fierce Japanese resistance. Not because Japanese defenders weren't fighting courageously. Shibasaki could hear desperate battle cries of his own men through bunker walls. American coordination minimized their exposure to defensive fire while maximizing effectiveness of their own attacks. When Japanese forces concentrated to repel one landing area, American spotters immediately called in airstrikes on exposed defenders. When Japanese artillery opened fire, American counter-battery fire silenced those guns within minutes through coordinated naval gunfire. Every Japanese tactical response met immediate coordinated American counter-response. Shibasaki realized, with growing horror, that his men were fighting individual battles while Americans fought one unified battle. "Urgent report from our Saipan intelligence network," his communications officer announced, reading from a decoded message. Sergeant Yamauchi reports American coordination at that location left him too petrified to move under systematic bombardment. Those words hit Shibasaki like a physical blow. Yamauchi was a decorated veteran, a man whose courage had been proven in battles across the Pacific. If systematic American coordination could paralyze a soldier like Yamauchi, what did that mean for traditional Japanese fighting spirit? The impossible became routine through his periscope. American landing craft navigated coral reefs with precision, suggesting detailed hydrographic surveys. Supply boats arrived exactly when advancing Marines needed ammunition and medical supplies. Medical evacuation helicopters coordinated with ground units to remove wounded personnel without disrupting tactical operations. Every element of American operations functioned as part of a unified system. Direct communication from Lieutenant General Kuribayashi at Iwo Jima, his communications officer reported, holding a radio handset. He requests immediate strategic consultation. Shibasaki took the handset with trembling fingers. Kuribayashi's voice crackled through static, but his words were clear. "Shibasaki, what we're witnessing defies all tactical doctrine. Violence of enemy bombardments far exceed description. Power of U.S. warships and aircraft makes every landing operation possible to whatever beachhead they like." Admission from one of Japan's most respected generals confirmed Shibasaki's worst fears. This wasn't isolated to Tarawa. American coordination capabilities represented a systematic revolution in warfare affecting every Pacific battlefield. Psychological impact on Japanese defenders went deeper than tactical defeat. Our forward observers report American forces using smokescreens with tactical precision, his artillery commander announced. They're coordinating smoke deployment with advancing units to provide cover exactly when and where needed. Coordinated smoke tactics. Decades of military history study had never shown Shibasaki systematic integration at this level of detail. Bunker walls shook as American naval gunfire walked closer to his command post. Through concrete barriers, he could hear screams of his men, explosions of ammunition stores, grinding sound of American bulldozers clearing beach obstacles under covering fire. This wasn't random destruction. This was systematic coordination, destroying Japanese defenses piece by piece according to unified planning. Casualty reports coming in from all sectors, his intelligence officer announced, voice barely audible above bombardment. American casualties approximately 20%. He paused, checking his figures. We're approaching 99% casualties in forward positions. 20% American casualties versus 99% Japanese casualties. Mathematics of coordination versus individual courage. American engineers constructed supply dumps under fire through his periscope. Marines advanced past destroyed Japanese positions. Medical personnel treated wounded Americans within sight of active combat zones. Radio operators maintained communication between units despite amphibious warfare chaos. Every American operated as part of a coordinated system that functioned despite individual casualties, equipment failures, and tactical setbacks. Japanese defenders fought with legendary courage. Courage could not overcome systematic coordination. Individual heroism could not defeat integrated planning. Traditional warrior spirit could not triumph over modern systematic warfare. As the 76th hour approached, Shibasaki made his final radio transmission to Tokyo. American coordination capabilities exceed all previous military experience. Traditional defensive doctrine rendered obsolete. Recommend immediate strategic review of all Pacific operations. Transmission cut off as American forces overran his command bunker. Shibasaki's death represented more than the fall of Tarawa. It marked the moment when traditional warfare died and modern coordinated operations were born. Systematic coordination that destroyed Shibasaki's impregnable fortress in 76 hours would force Japanese strategic doctrine to evolve from aggressive expansion to desperate attrition. Coordination tactics that paralyzed Sergeant Yamauchi would ultimately drive Japanese forces to abandon conventional warfare entirely. What American forces demonstrated at Tarawa wasn't just tactical superiority. It was a glimpse of warfare's future where integration and coordination triumph over individual courage and traditional tactics. Ripple effects would transform not just the Pacific War, but military doctrine for generations to come. Silence after Tarawa's fall was more devastating than 76 hours of coordinated bombardment. In interrogation rooms across the Pacific, captured Japanese officers struggled to explain what they witnessed. Vice Admiral Jisaburo Ozawa sat under harsh fluorescent lights in a U.S. Navy facility. He finally spoke words that haunted every Japanese commander. We express surprise at American task force coordination and intelligence capabilities. Their ability to integrate air, sea, and land operations was beyond our tactical understanding. Beyond their tactical understanding. Words from one of Japan's most respected naval commanders represented more than military defeat. They signaled death of an entire military philosophy. Personal aftermath cut even deeper. Sergeant Yamauchi survived Saipan. The man who returned to Japan after the war bore little resemblance to the confident soldier who once believed in supremacy of Japanese fighting spirit. In post-war interviews, he described coordination paralysis that left experienced veterans too petrified to move under systematic American fire. "We trained to fight individual Americans," Yamauchi explained, voice barely above a whisper. "We prepared to overcome their equipment with our spirit. We never prepared to fight their system." The word captured what Japanese military doctrine failed to anticipate. Warfare where individual courage becomes irrelevant because systematic coordination removes chaos that traditionally allowed heroism to triumph. Lieutenant General Kuribayashi's evolution from confident fortress commander to strategic realist illustrated this transformation. Final communications with Tokyo revealed a man whose worldview had been fundamentally shattered. The United States is the last country in the world we should fight. This wasn't just tactical assessment. It was cultural capitulation. Warrior culture that dominated Japanese military thinking for centuries admitted that systematic American coordination had rendered traditional combat obsolete. Strategic ripple effects reshaped the entire Pacific War. After Tarawa, Japanese forces completely abandoned beachfront defense tactics that had been standard military doctrine for generations. Instead, they developed underground fortification systems designed specifically to survive coordinated bombardments. Even these adaptations proved insufficient against American integration capabilities. Captain Rikihei Inoguchi, responsible for coordinating kamikaze operations, provided the most devastating admission in post-war interrogations. American coordination created superiority impossible to overcome through traditional military methods. Kamikaze tactics weren't about Japanese fanaticism or death worship. They represented strategic acknowledgement that conventional warfare against American coordination was hopeless. If Japanese forces couldn't coordinate effectively enough to win battles, they would coordinate to inflict maximum psychological damage through suicide attacks. Ultimate irony emerged. The nation that shocked the world with Pearl Harbor's coordination was forced to abandon coordinated warfare because American integration capabilities surpassed their own. Impact extended far beyond World War II. Marine Corps University documentation reveals how Japanese adaptation forced American amphibious doctrine to evolve as well. Underground fortifications. Japanese forces developed in response to coordination shock pushed American integration to even higher levels of sophistication. Modern military operations from Desert Storm to contemporary NATO exercises trace their origins directly to coordination innovations that stunned Japanese defenders between 1942 and 1945. Integration techniques that seemed impossible to Shibasaki are now standard operating procedures taught in military academies worldwide. Samuel Eliot Morrison, the official U.S. Navy historian, summarized the transformation. American amphibious coordination represented the most significant advancement in warfare integration since development of combined arms tactics. Universal lessons transcend military applications. The Pacific War proved that systematic coordination consistently triumphs over individual effort, regardless of how courageously that effort is executed. Japanese defenders at Tarawa, Saipan, and Iwo Jima fought with legendary bravery. Systematic American integration made individual heroism strategically irrelevant. Today's business coordination, technological integration, and international cooperation all reflect lessons learned from systematic coordination that shocked Japanese forces into abandoning their entire military philosophy. Warriors who began the Pacific War, believing fighting spirit could overcome any obstacle, ended the war, studying American coordination methods they once dismissed as impossible. Consider coordination challenges in your own life and career. How often do individual efforts fail, not because of insufficient courage or dedication, but because of inadequate integration with larger systems? What would happen if you applied systematic coordination principles that revolutionized warfare to your own professional and personal challenges? Which element of American coordination do you think was most psychologically devastating to Japanese defenders? The technical integration, the real-time adaptation, the systematic nature that made individual heroism irrelevant? Share your thoughts on how military innovations continue shaping the way we solve complex problems today.